We have my amazing partner and husband back in the studio that you helped build with me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
To talk today about the beginning of our Connection Codes journey, what that looks like, where we struggled, and what made a difference to get us where we are today.
Yeah.
So that is where we are going. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. I am your host, Tera Wages. And joining me today is video producer, husband to the CEO of Connection Codes, Wes Wages. There you go.
And pilot.
Oh, sorry. And pilot.
all of these.
Yes, we teach people how to break open their emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in their relationships and in yourself. So thank you so much for being here.
Honored to sit beside you and do this.
It really is a joy. And I feel weird because my intro always includes Dr. Glenn and Phyllis, who are our founders. If this is your very first episode listening, they're usually who's on the podcast with me.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to do an intro if they're not sitting here. But
I should have done the intro for you.
You should have. That's what we'll make you do next time you're here.
Okay, done.
But I am so glad that you're here with me. Thank you. I kind of rope Wes in whenever I'm needing some podcasts or there's some specific topics that people are asking for.
Obviously by my loungewear today, if you're watching this on YouTube, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, hey, what are you doing in the next hour?
Yeah. Please set up the equipment and do this with me. Yeah. We have been on this journey since 2020. So we are just over about 4.5 years in to us learning about these tools that Dr. Glenn and Phyllis created. We were invited to join a webinar back at the beginning of COVID from our now neighbor, previously one of Wes's clients. And as soon as we watched, I was hooked. You asked us to watch, and I was the one that got hooked in.
Yeah, I have so much joy in that because there's many times in the relationship where I'm like, ooh, we should do this because I'm all about like new things, new ideas. And most of the time, understandably, you're like, okay, whatever. Like,
yes,
that's your thing. Cool.
Yes.
But yeah, you got into this.
Yeah. Well, your personality type is you have 10 ideas before breakfast. And so I had previously gotten really good at just dismissing those ideas, which was not helpful for our relationship.
Yeah, talk about bringing in the connection codes. Yeah, we learned that you just need to ooh me.
Yes, yes.
And then the ideas will just wither away.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
But I had to dismiss your ideas or we would have been bankrupt because you have so many. And I also don't like to try new things. I very much kind of have a pattern of getting set in my ways. Once I find something, I stick to that thing and I don't need to change the restaurant. I don't need to change my order at the restaurant. Like I know what I want. And you constantly like change, but then you also struggle with the follow through. So there are times where I create the change with you and then you don't follow through and then I'm left on my own. Like anytime we watch a murder mystery documentary series that you encourage us to watch, and next thing I know, I'm having to finish the entire series by myself because you fell asleep. So follow through has been tough for you. And so I've been hesitant to join into new things. And this was something that kind of fell into our lap at truly the right moment. And I agreed to do it. I didn't have anything else to do. And
you had a lot to do. Well, you made an effort to do this.
I did have a lot to do. Yes. You're not wrong about that. Well, it was like the third week into COVID. So it's not that I had a lot to do at that time, but I had a lot of stress. I had a lot of pain. And so this was kind of for helping with that.
Yeah.
And the moment that really shifted for me was the first time you and I ever did the core emotion wheel, which the core emotion wheel is the 4-minute tool that Dr. Glenn and Phyllis created to teach us how to identify and process our emotions so we can connect in relationships. And we like to start our podcast by doing this tool at the beginning. So Wes and I are going to demonstrate what it looks like to use this tool in real time of what's happening for us today. But it truly was this that showed me this was unlike anything you and I had ever done together. And I was instantly hooked on this process. So you gave this back to me. Do you want me to go first? Okay, so with this tool, we share the most recent time we felt one of the core emotions. If we can't think of a recent time, we think of a big time. If we can't think of a big time, we can make something up. Yeah. And so for me, I feel anger. I have, the word that came to my head is like an unhealthy amount, but I have deep, intense core level anger that we made it into the second day of school before we had a school shooting this year. Deep core level anger about that is the narrative for our kids and our teachers and the parents, what we have to live in every day. So much core level anger about that. I have shame because as you were setting this equipment up for us, I always feel insecure about my chin and my double chin. And I notice that it's showing. So I have shame in my body. I have shame in how I look. And no matter what I try to do, it's just still there. And so I have shame in how I present.
Yeah.
I feel guilt. I have guilt. I have two guilts right now. One, I didn't slow down with our daughter this morning. She got really heightened and I sped it up. And I also have guilt that I missed with you the other night when you were needing to connect with me sexually. And my initial response was hurtful to you. I have guilt about that. I have fear. What fear do I have? Fear about our kids' safety. I had fear this weekend when we had a kid that was lost. For a while. I had fear in that. Lonely. I have loneliness because there is a lot on my plate. There's a lot that I manage both professionally and in our family and just in life. And I feel loneliness because it just feels very unseen. And so that's lonely. Sad. I feel sad. Sad's like the dull. And I do feel this kind of dull, like something's missing. Okay, that's good. Sad is when there's like something missing or damaged. My hairstylist has decided to retire or like not come back from maternity leave. So now I need to find someone new. And I feel really, really sad about that. It's a process. It's hard to commit to. I feel hurt. That working out is so painful. I feel physically hurt every day. And I have joy. I have so much joy right now. Joy in your partnership, that you will take time out of your day to do this with me. And you decorate our house for Halloween. And that last night, when you were processing your hurt with me, that's something that typically would have sent us into a deep spiral previously, but it didn't even turn into conflict last night. Yeah. So joy in that. Thank you.
It means the world. Like, and one thing I would say, like in doing this, as much as I wanted to interrupt you and like say, like, I can't believe you would even look at yourself like that. Like, I don't see any of this. Yeah. Your physical features that you don't like. That like, I can't do that. That's hard to do. But I just got to you in that. And that's what you did last night when we went through this
conflict.
Yeah.
Well, you're hurt when you're processing.
Yeah. We just oohed each other. Okay.
You're not supposed to hold it. Put it right there.
Oops, sorry. Anger. I have anger that it's hard for me. Like, I have to go to another job soon. You know what I mean? And I have anger at myself. It's not just easy for me to be like, hey, I have to do this. Like, I've known for like 72 hours and it's hard for me to tell you that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just angry at myself for like delaying conversations sometimes when they need to happen.
Yeah.
I have shame in, just not ever being motivated to work out. Like that's, and just having a great indoor gym, you know what I mean, that we have, and just not doing anything at all.
Get that.
Guilt for not knowing what to do this morning when our daughter was like, flooded. Just not knowing what to do in the right situation with that.
Yeah.
I wanted to help out, but just didn't know what to do. Fear in getting it all done right now. I think of just, we have a lot of things going in multiple places. I totally understand that we can do this, but do have just fear of like, will it all work? Lonely. I felt sexual loneliness, which I talked to you about last night. That was good.
Yeah, I get that.
And it wasn't the fact that we weren't having sex. It was the fact that I just felt that. And I think that was good for me to realize and talk to you about. Because most of the time I would have in the past just in like, oh, we're not having sex. Boom, loneliness. But no, we even had sex and I felt loneliness. So sad that we've had so much food in the refrigerator that we've thrown away.
Ooh, get that.
We've had a lot of stuff going on. So like there's just been food in there that we've planned for meals, but then we haven't had, or we've chosen to eat out. Or so sad at that.
Get that.
Hurt in the way the kids respond to us sometimes. Yeah. And hurt in how one of our kids doesn't acknowledge her joy at all, mostly. You know what I mean? And just hurt that we do things and like, it's just really hard to experience that joy with them. And yes, fear also, that's just coming to my head of like losing one of our children this weekend.
I get that.
And that was where I called 911. That was scary.
Yes, I get that.
So joy that a few people have messaged me and said, hey, like, you're not a bad parent. Like, that happened to me and my kid. And multiple people have told me that.
Yeah.
So I felt joy in that moment of just being of the camaraderie, if you will.
Yeah. Solidarity.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I always love doing that with you and with our kids because there is something happening for you that I can't see. And now after we do that, I can be on the same page with you. I can hear what's going on in your body, not even necessarily to fix it or defend myself or do anything about it. But now I just have a better understanding of you,
Totally. Like, I mean, honestly, I feel guilt for this. You've mentioned that your hairdresser lady, like maybe like a week ago or something, you were like, you felt some sadness in there and guilt, but like I totally just like bypassed that.
That's okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like until you just brought it up again and I was like, oh man, that's like a big, you have like fear in there of just finding someone or you're sad.
There's so many options. And if you go to the wrong one and they jack you up, then like it's your hair.
We'll have a different podcast here.
Yes.
But no, I'm so glad to hear that again. Like it's so good. Like the wheel has literally like opened us up this what each other are thinking about. And like I struggle so much of like sometimes thinking about what you're thinking about in your head. You know what I mean? That's just one of my things. Shame for that. But this has helped me so much just understand what's going on in your head sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have very much time with each other.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people, especially if you are building your career, you spend a lot of time building your career or you have a lot of kids in your home and our conversations are cut short constantly. And so this gives us the opportunity to know very quickly, very deeply what's actually happening for you and what's happening for me so we can connect.
Yeah.
And so after we did that for the very first time ever, you shared with me something that I had no idea you were experiencing. And I was like unintentionally making it worse for you. I was pouring gas on your sadness without even knowing you were sad. And you just didn't know how to share with me what was happening. And so from there, I was hooked. And you ended up getting some jobs, which we were desperate for income at that time. We had a team of like 6 or 7 employees, and you were the only one able to go to the jobs and work, which it required a ton of travel from you. So you were out of town for the last like 2 or 3 live webinars. We were doing it live at the time. Glenn and Phyllis were. And so you missed them. And then I, of course, still got on and watched live. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, this is what we've been struggling for our entire relationship. And everything just clicked into place for me. But I actually, to this day, don't know if you ever went back and watched those.
I don't remember past last week, so I don't know.
It's okay.
I think through osmosis, now 4 years in, I've picked it up.
You picked it up now.
Yeah. No, I do remember having to miss those, and that was a big deal for you.
Yeah.
You really wanted me at the time to go back, and I was super busy.
Because they were answering the question that we struggled with so long. So our pattern in our relationship would be, and I think we're okay sharing this, is that I would feel a lot of sadness, especially during that time. I'm sad because I'm home with the kids. I'm not able to go to work. And so you would come home from being out of town and you would feel so much guilt for being gone that then you would get mad at me for being sad. And then I would get mad at you for being like, we would call it like passing the guilt ball back and forth. And that's what we would do. Like I would feel sad. You would feel upset with me for being sad. Then I would feel guilt for making you feel guilt that I felt sad. It was a mess. And that's what they talk about in Foundations there at the very end. Also, our pattern was that you would have said like that you're not an emotional person up to that point. You would have said, I don't have any fear. Like I don't live in any of these. So you were kind of emotionally like the one of us that like either was numb or had stuffed their emotions.
Yeah, totally. Like I remember when Glenn said one time, I think they're over at the house, and he was like, well, like I believe that everyone has hundreds of emotions every day. And I was like, no, dude, like you're telling me that I've felt all of these hundreds of times today? Like, I was like, oh, I didn't feel any loneliness today.
Yeah.
But I mean, now knowing and now starting to realize and put this language into our minds, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like I'm hit with a lot of those things multiple times.
Yeah.
Will I acknowledge them or will I process them? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that's the whole point, right? For us to get this out of our body. So,
right, is to process them, which we will, I do want to talk before the end of this podcast about now your before and after, because some people would listen to that and be like, well, I don't want to acknowledge that I feel lonely hundreds of times a day.
I didn't either.
Yeah. And so what the benefit is for you now that you do acknowledge it. But we were just stuck in this really painful cycle, and you put up a wall against it. There were even times you're like, I'm done. This emotional stuff does not work. We would have fights over doing the connection codes early on in our relationship.
I was putting it kindly the way you said it.
Yes. Like, yes. I mean, there were some pretty big arguments taking place, especially when I was trying to implement it with our kids, because it goes against the norm of what we are taught for how to handle children. Completely goes against the norm. And so we were just really, really struggling through that. But I was committed. I was not going to give up. I knew this was the answer, but it was really, really painful. I would say for the first 2 years of doing it. Yeah. It was very lonely, very painful. And it felt like I was just like trying to keep my head above the water. But I knew that this was the answer. And so I think this shift really did happen as we got deeper into getting to know, for us, Dr. Glenn and Phyllis. We didn't have, the Connection Codes community wasn't as large at that time as it is now. Yeah. And so we didn't know any other connection coders. Glenn and Phyllis, luckily, we were able to get to know them on a personal level and spend time with them. And they were able to speak directly into our lives. And also the podcast didn't exist at that time. So I watched those classes live and I never learned anything again.
Yeah.
Like that was the extent of what I had. And I was holding on to those videos and this tool with like dear life, but there was no further education. So your audience, you're welcome.
We were like, how do we get this out?
How do we get this out to the world? Yeah. But it was really tough. And so for us, or I should say for Wes, what do you think the hard part was for you? What was so sticky for you to want to do this early on?
One of the things early on I do remember was one of our kids. We were at the dinner table and doing the wheel, and one of our kids said, I believe it was shame, because he was flying his kite one day and a neighbor came over and said like, hey, your kite's weird, you know? And that was months ago. So we basically asked him like, oh, did you feel shame today? He didn't feel shame. Well, think of a time you did feel shame. And he brought that back from like 6 weeks to 2 months earlier. And I was just amazed at the fact that like he identified what shame was. And that little, like that feeling was in his little body for those 2 months. And he had just never processed that. And that's one of the things I do remember of just being like, wow, this is pretty powerful that we can just connect with that.
Yeah. So that's a moment that you saw a shift happen.
Yes.
What made you so resistant to it early on? Where was the pain for you in this process?
It's a good question. I think it's because it's not, what do we say? It's like we have to be slow to be fast.
Slower is faster. Yep.
And that's just not me.
Yeah.
I like to be efficient and just take care of the situation immediately in all things mostly. And so, yeah, we had to it was a slow process where we had to sit there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's uncomfortable. Even last night I was doing the wheel with our youngest and it was taking a long time, but I understand slow is fast is that if we sit there and process that emotion with them, we'll be able to move a lot quicker. Or we could sit there and blow up and they're flooded and we're flooded and we just get really frustrated and we sit there and live with that guilt all night into the next day. And and nobody wants that feeling. Gosh, we have felt that so much, especially in parenting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do not want that feeling again. So we just have to sit there and do the will and process it.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. When I was on my group coaching call on Friday, that was actually our takeaway from the call was that slower is faster. Mm-hmm. There are so many times where we speed up because the anger hits, that secondary anger or even core level anger will hit. And we either want to solve the problem or defend ourselves. And so that actually ramps everything up. I experienced that this morning. I did not slow down with our daughter and I sped everything up and then things escalated. But when we can actually slow down and not become defensive or not try to fix it and just try to connect with the other person's experience, then we can actually get to the other side faster.
Yeah.
And I think that for me was the harder part because I want to defend myself. Desperately bad. I want to prove that I did everything I could to be correct and right and good. I'm a good person. Mm-hmm. So even last night when you come to me and you're expressing your hurt with me the other night because you wanted to connect sexually, and we did. But in my initial reaction to that, I was like, I'm in a hurry. I don't have the energy or the capacity to do anything right now. And that was hurtful to you. And so previously, in the early days of us doing this process, if you had said that hurt for me, I would have responded like, listen, do you know everything I did last week? You were out of town and I did this and this and this and this. I told you I didn't have any energy. Can't you just be grateful for what I do? That would have been my response to you. Yeah. And it was hard even last night not to do that. Or last night to be like, but we did have sex and I was present and it was good. And why can't you just be grateful for that? And instead, truly the difference is slowing down and for me to recognize, that would hurt you. You have anybody has any right to whatever emotions that they're having. But I completely understand why that would be hurtful for you. And I missed on that.
Yeah.
And so just being able to honor your experience and not make it about me, not make it that I was horrible or bad or wrong, but just that would be hurtful. I can't change it. I can just say, I see you in that. And through that, we never disconnected. We never even had tension between the two of us. And that didn't mean that I needed to do anything next.
Yeah, totally. I wasn't saying hey, let's have connected
That means you
sex
got to
right now.
do it again. You know?
Yeah, I just processed with you.
Yeah.
And the cool thing was I didn't even know you were doing the whole connection. You know what I mean? I didn't know you were doing this process. I felt validated.
Well, I mean, of course, I'm like seeing you. You know what I mean?
But
I wasn't, you know, I don't want it to come off that I was like acting. I was not acting at all. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, not saying you're acting. I just like, I didn't say, oh, we're doing the process right now. I was completely just let you know how I was feeling. And then we moved on.
Yeah.
Read something this morning that correlates with us a little bit of like, in the storm, drop the anchor. Like when you feel a flood of emotions coming and happening, like drop the anchor, like be in tune with yourself for that moment. And then like let the storms pass, because that's going to hold you to where you need to be. And sometimes I think it's like when we feel this flood of emotion coming on, like which happens to us, it can happen daily.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's just like taking the breath, dropping the anchor, and like, let's stand here for a second.
Find out what's happening.
Process these emotions, and then we can move forward, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's really good.
Yeah.
But it really does show a difference of where we used to be, where truly early on, even after doing the connection codes for a couple of years, we would have still had conflict over that, because it inevitably either I would have become defensive when you tried to process your hurt, or you would have just gotten so upset with me that then it would have turned into anger and it would have escalated, or you'd have disconnected from me. You'd have been short and distant.
Yeah, it would have been like, I can never talk to you.
Yeah.
There's no way I can talk to you, because everything I say, you're going to get defensive. And
Right. And so slower is faster. And then also truly just tuning in and letting someone else have their experience, which is really, really hard. I think that those are two big things that we struggled with early on, of not feeling like it was about us, that you get to have your own experience. Yeah. But I think the difference for us that really got us through was I, and then we committed to this process.
Yeah, totally.
You know, like I think it's true with anything that you can start something, but then if you stop or you give up just because it gets hard, you're not going to succeed. Mm-hmm. And we made the commitment of, we believe in this. And even though it doesn't feel like it's working right now, if we keep going, if we dig deeper, we will see the results. And we have, like, 1,000% over. Our relationship today is night and day from what it was 2 years ago. Definitely what it was 4 years ago. I was talking with someone this week, and she was sharing a conflict that she and her husband were having. And oh my gosh, hearing her talk, I was like, that was us. That was our pattern. That was everything that we did 1,000 times over. And now seeing what can happen because we committed to this just blows my mind.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you, knowing that early on you would have said, oh, I don't feel lonely 1,000 times, or not 1,000. I don't feel loneliness every day. And I definitely don't want to feel hurt every day. And now you can recognize when those things happen. What result has that given for you? And also fear. I know fear was one that you said you didn't feel.
Yeah, I mean, first, thank you. Yes, I totally agree. I mean, just knowing my personality, this would have been awesome for a couple of months, and then I would have been on to the next thing. Do you know what I mean? But like truly, like diving into this and putting it into practice has changed our life. Yeah. Changed the way, like I've said this before, but our kids now have a superpower where they can go and like express their emotions.
Yeah.
Versus just feeling this anger, you know?
Yeah. And I just want to say to that really quick, sorry, because we've like talked about it, even instance this morning, that doesn't mean we don't get flooded sometimes. You know, like our kids absolutely get flooded, but before my kid got on the bus today, they were able to come to me and be like, whew, like guilt that happened. You know, like, I'm sorry. And I can tell like, I feel so much guilt that I didn't slow down with you.
Yeah.
We are able to connect quickly because of that. And for me, that is the goal.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, you know, beforehand, and being a person of maybe little feelings and like I didn't feel fear, loneliness, I mean, I don't know in that moment what it felt like because I just wasn't identifying those emotions. You know what I mean? I was I wasn't probably putting those to the side, and then they were all coming up. Like I remember those times where I could just blow up all at one time and not really know where all this is coming from, and then have to do a lot of digging to uncover that, you know?
Okay, so earlier you mentioned that, you used to not identify when you felt loneliness throughout the day or any pain. And now you do feel those things. Mm-hmm. And so I would assume for our listeners to be like, yeah, I would prefer not to feel them. Can I just not? I actually don't want to acknowledge my loneliness or my pain every day. So I'm curious for you as someone who has kind of had that transformation, how has that impacted you?
Yeah. So, I mean, as an example, it's easy to remember before we were connection codes. It's actually not easy to remember, but during COVID, hit with a ton of fear.
Yes, this was even our first 2 years of connection codes.
Yeah, so I wasn't doing it. I hear that. We were traveling a ton, so I was like, hey, we don't know when income is coming in. We lost a lot of money. I'm just going to work as much as possible. And 4 kids at home. You were also homeschooling them. And then I would come home exhausted. Do you know what I mean? Little sleep. And then...
Yeah, but from my perspective, you'd gotten a break.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely did. I mean, yeah, I don't even know if you in that moment, you were working so hard. Yeah. I was working so hard. And we each had our own stories in our minds.
Totally.
But I basically would hide any of those feelings because I didn't want you to feel those feelings, or I would blow up at you because I'm home for these 24 hours. We're not having sex. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Oh, shame.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
To now, kind of back to traveling, and we can process these emotions in real time.
Yeah.
And the feelings are still there. I feel the exact same thing I did then. But now the difference is I'm not I can just process the emotion with you and say, in regards to me traveling, the topic specific, just I feel anger that I'm not able to share this with you immediately, and shame for being gone.
Yeah.
And guilt because, I could get a job locally and just stay here all day and help completely,
Yeah.
So I can tell these things in real time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so we can work through that.
Yeah. So how I view it from the outside perspective is previously, you were still feeling the guilt. You were feeling the sad. You were feeling the fear. You were definitely feeling lonely. All of those things were still firing in your body. You couldn't identify what was happening, but instead your body was reacting. You were a spiky person. You presented very intensely. You would come home and it felt like there were just spikes all in our relationship. And I had my own spikes too. And we were just stabbing each other all the time. Or you would be blowing up because you were feeling extreme loneliness and not being seen both by our team and by me of all that you were sacrificing to do for our family. And now you can actually say, oh, I'm really lonely, or I feel a lot of hurt or guilt over this. And just by saying it to me and having me hold space for you reduces your spikes.
Oh, totally. And I can even see it in you. When I tell you that I feel guilt for being gone, or, not getting the kids ready all this week because I'm gone. I can see you open up a little bit and say, okay, he does see me.
Absolutely.
And that feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true because you can't change that. But just you acknowledging I feel guilt that I'm going to be gone and you're going to have to carry the whole weight of our home.
Yeah.
That's identity for me. That's you saying, I see you. I see that you're also sacrificing and you're also doing this just by you processing your own guilt.
Yeah. And beforehand, I felt all those things, but I'd never told you.
And so then I felt extremely lonely, extremely unseen and unappreciated for everything that I was doing. And so now you actually identifying it helps you because you can communicate and connect. And I was thinking about this even for myself, that I've shared on the podcast, logistically, I have a lot going on right now. I feel pretty intense with just my task list. And so I was thinking about it today of like, okay, I'm doing this program. I'm coaching people through their overwhelm. And here I am, like with this insane task list and like having moments of overwhelm myself. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, well, what is the difference here? Like, what is separating me from these other people? And it really did like clue into me, us. You know, like how we can operate, how we operate with our kids, how I can operate within myself, that by being able to process these emotions and get this out of my body, I am so much more connected. I feel so much clearer than if I had the tasks and the emotions.
Yeah, totally.
Oh my gosh, I would be unfunctional.
Yeah.
And so being able to lighten that emotional load, like this is life. You know, tasks are going to come. Yep. Having seasons where your husband is out of town and 4 people come in town and your kids have these activities and you have all this work stuff, those things are going to happen. But for me to be able to still show up in my body and feel connected to you relieves so much of the overwhelm and the pressure from it. And so, yeah, like those beginning years were hard. They were sticky. And they were not pretty all the time.
I'm just thinking you can listen to all of that on the podcast we had.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You could listen to all those hard moments.
We did. Wes and I had our own podcast during that season called I Get It. And you hear the beginning of our connection coach journey, and I would be like, well, our therapist, Dr. Glenn, or our marriage coach, or I heard this from them. Like, that's when we were getting to know this process. That's so true. Yeah. And some of our fights are on there as well.
It was a lot, yeah.
Is one named Cheesecake. I know there was a big argument over cheesecake that we talked about on there. But
and now it's just joy.
But truly, like, committing to the process. Keep going even though it was hard, but also get support. And so for us, that was Dr. Glenn and Phyllis that partnered with us. I am coaching people through the Overwhelm Overhaul. You can book time in the calendar to unpack your goals to help you get unstuck as well. But truly, that changes everything. Mm-hmm. And where we are today, oh my gosh, is worth everything.
100% agree. Yeah, I mean, that is cool. We got to learn from Dr. Glenn and Phyllis. You know what I mean? That they were our partners in that.
Yeah, yeah.
But now there's a whole community. We can kind of, because I was skeptical. You know what I mean? I was like, this is not working. This is taking too long. This feels too weird. Probably because I just was connecting with my emotions. But yeah, I'm really thankful we're here now.
Yeah. That's what I hear you say.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people listening where their partner or themselves, like their wife or their husband sent them this episode. They're like, hey, this is you. This is where you're at.
Totally.
So what would you say to those people? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. 100%, I would say, for me to be able to communicate all the things that I'm feeling to you and to not let it blow up and turn into a bigger ordeal, and to not to leave, oh, this is lots of pain here. We would get into a fight and then I would leave for the week. And then that whole week was like the most uncomfortable, gut-wrenching feeling of like the whole week.
Yeah.
And the fact that now we can just process that, it is night and day difference. So, and that's what I know you've talked about, like showing up at work and at home, you know what I mean? Like 100%, like we've all had the thing, you fight in the morning and then you spend the whole day trying to put on a face, you know what I mean? Where you're just like, oh, everything's fine. How's Tera doing? Oh, she's great. We're having a blast. When like in reality, no, we just got into a big fight and I haven't talked to her. I don't know if I want to talk to her.
Yeah.
And then we get home and it just continues. And then our kids see that and they're like, oh, this is what marriage is like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now we can just process that.
Yeah.
And my kids know, like, for me to be able to communicate with my kids and for them to be able to share things that I know would just be built inside of them and stay inside of them or be buried has been dramatically different.
Yeah.
So, like, I know I used to worry so much about when our first one was going to kindergarten.
Yeah.
And I know every day we would be like, oh, how's kindergarten? Like, we ask all the questions and everything. You know what I mean? Well, now, like, the last one's in kindergarten, we can just be like, ooh, let's go to the emotion wheel. And boom, there we have it. That's everything I need to know.
Yeah.
And I'm not wrestling inside about this, like, well, what's happening? What's this?
Are you okay?
It's all these questions in your head. And then you start to feel shame because all the questions are in your head and like, yeah. I truly don't feel that way anymore. So
even that relieves some of your overwhelm.
Totally. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Just because I know that people are in the middle of the messy part. Because when you start this process, Phyllis calls it a bottleneck. You know, the first several times where you're doing this, it can suck.
Yeah.
It can be really painful to hear your partner process their sexual pain for the last 12 years. That can be really painful. It can be really painful to hear your partner process their loneliness of you being gone all the time. Like it can be really, really painful. But holding that safe space and just being like, wow, yeah, that was painful. Like, I see you. I see why that hurt you. And just honoring that makes all the difference in the world. And because sometimes with my coaching, I'm like, how would you feel if that happened? Mm-hmm. You know, like, oh, that would really hurt me. Yeah, it would.
It's so funny. I mean, we've been married 16 years, and it's still hard to this day to put ourselves in the other person's shoes sometimes, right? And just to bring that back up really quick, while I was traveling, I didn't know what was going on with you so much. I felt like, man, I'm working really hard to maintain everyone's salaries and do all this stuff. But like, yeah, you had, here was the big pain. It was constantly, you're gone all the time. And
from me.
Yeah, you would say that. And I got every single time you would say that. And you would say that to friends and family, and like every single time.
That was me trying to process my loneliness, but I didn't know how.
Yeah, I would be immediately hit with so much shame and guilt and anger. You know what I mean? Like, well, she doesn't even see like what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? And I eventually, through the process, just realized, like, dude, that is your experience. You have those emotions and you're entitled to them. Just like earlier when we did the wheel at the very beginning, you were like, I see my double chin and I see like, dude, I don't see any of that stuff in you. And as much as I wanted to rebuttal that statement that you said, like, no, that's your experience. And I want you to be able to that and get that out of your body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No matter how many times I tell you you're beautiful, it's like you still have your own feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do appreciate when you tell me that I'm beautiful.
Yeah, I'm not going to stop doing that. That's one thing. Like, there's even the most beautiful like woman in the world is they're going to see their flaws. You know what I mean? And men.
Well, for me, what I'm hearing take from that is that, yes, it has been hard to put each other in each other's shoes, get in the other person's shoes. This has made it easier for me. Mm-hmm. By understanding like what hurt actually feels like. Now, when you process your hurt with me, I can understand that. Like, I get that now. Yeah. Where before, if you were processing your loneliness of being gone, I wouldn't have gotten that because I didn't understand loneliness.
Yeah.
And now when you share your loneliness, I can be like, whew, yeah, that's pretty lonely.
Yeah.
And so using this verbiage helps me to put myself in your shoes. It does help me to see you so much better than we did before. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of the people that I'm working with. Like, two people are carrying a ton and we cannot see each other.
Yeah.
We cannot see what the other person is doing, but this tool gives us the opportunity to truly see the other person. But holding that safe space makes all the difference.
And it's so simple.
Yeah.
Like, even at this weekend, I was in Puerto Rico at like this leadership thing. And they had the emotion wheel out. Like, this one dude who's literally a therapist, he's like, let me bring my emotional wheel out. And he brought it out. And it was like the 130 emotions. I'm like, bro, that is complicated. Like, I get overwhelmed at that and don't even want to like jump into that. This is just so like simple.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, bro, you can just narrow that thing down, you know, and let's be efficient in this process. I think that's one reason why I love it.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for putting the time in. And as much as I wanted to jump to the next thing that's happening, like, thank you for investing into this so much that you made it your career. And, not only educating everybody else, but educating our family and sticking to it. Like just last night, you know what I mean? Like one of our kids was expressing their sadness.
Yeah.
And I jumped in there and I was like, how could you be sad right now?
I took you to the skating rink. I did this for you.
Yeah. And I messed up. And later that night, I processed with her and said, hey, baby, what's the word? I told her I missed it. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm sorry. Like, if you don't mind, can I ask you to do this again? You know what I mean? You don't have to, but I'm asking you to do it again.
Yeah.
And I was like, I missed it. You know, like we do that and that happens.
Yeah.
So.
It's a game changer. So if you are in those beginning years or beginning few months, like the beginning stages, and you're like, whew, I don't know if I want to keep going in this. This is not comfortable. This does not feel good. Because what we say is it is simple, but it is not always easy. That is what Dr. Glenn says all the time about this tool. It is so simple, but it is not always easy. But I will tell you that if both partners can commit, it starts out with one of you starts, but when you
that was me, right?
No,
because I introduced this.
No, you don't get the credit for this one. But when both people can see the shift, and it creates with one person creating safety. I had to learn to create safety for Wes. And when Wes felt safe enough with me, then he could join in the process.
Yeah.
That's what happens is you felt safe with me and then you could take part. But if I had continued to make you feel unsafe by defending myself, fixing things, you would have never joined in. That would have continued to be our pattern. So if you're listening, create safety, keep going, and commit. If you want this change, commit. Because on the other side, you will see that shift. And also, lastly, the last component is get support. If you need to get a coach, we have certified coaches that are available to help you through this process. If you are experiencing overwhelm, I am here to help you with that. There will be a link in the show notes where you can reduce your overwhelm by 50% just by doing what we talked about today. Like I am, as logistically overwhelmed as I am so safe in my body and feel so connected to myself. So I know I feel less overwhelmed than I ever have been because I'm not drowning in disconnect. Yeah. And so I will walk you through that process of how to do that. Thank you for being here, for joining every week. Your 5-star reviews mean the absolute world to us. If you have not already left us a review, please leave us a review. They truly do help us to get the word out, to gain momentum and spread these tools with other people. And I know Glenn and Phyllis aren't here to say their ending. Are you going to say it with me? We do all of this because
you need this.
You deserve this.
Let's do this.
Let's do this.
I'll listen.
Good job.